Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into an unfolding political storm that's shaking Eastern Europe to its core. Belarus, a nation that has long stood in silence under the shadow of its powerful neighbors, is no longer silent. What's happening inside the country right now is nothing short of a political earthquake. A movement that could not only redefine Belarus's future, but also send shockwaves throughout the region. For years, the Belarusian people lived under the heavy hand of authoritarian control, censorship, and fear. But now, the silence has been broken, and the world is watching closely as something extraordinary begins to unfold. For nearly 3 decades, Belarus has been ruled by Alexander Lukashenko, a man often described as Europe's last dictator. He has survived countless protests, international sanctions, and even an attempted revolution in 2020. But despite his firm grip on power, cracks have begun to form within the system that once seemed unbreakable. The public mood is changing, the army's loyalty is wavering, and the country's political landscape is beginning to shift in ways that no one thought possible just a few years ago. The once tightly controlled state is now facing growing dissent from within, and even Lukashenko's closest allies are beginning to show signs of hesitation. At the center of this growing turmoil lies a mix of economic struggle, war fatigue, and political frustration. Belarus's economy has been weakened by years of sanctions and isolation, heavily dependent on Russia for trade, fuel, and political support. But as the war in Ukraine drags on, Belarus finds itself in an increasingly dangerous position. Supporting Moscow has brought the nation to the edge of global condemnation. Many Belarusians are questioning why their government continues to stand beside a war that has devastated lives and isolated their country even further from Europe and the rest of the world. The once stable alliance with Russia is now becoming a source of political tension, rather than strength. What makes this moment different from the past is that resistance is no longer limited to activists or opposition politicians. There are growing reports that discontent is spreading among the Belarusian elite, security forces, and even the military. High-ranking officials are quietly expressing doubts about continuing unconditional support for Moscow. Some have reportedly begun refusing to cooperate with Russian military logistics operations inside Belarus. Others are subtly distancing themselves from state media narratives, using coded language to express dissatisfaction. These may seem like small gestures, but in a country where dissent has long been punished with imprisonment or exile, such actions represent a major shift in courage and consciousness. The people, too, have started to speak again. The fear that once silenced the streets of Minsk, Brest, and Hrodna is slowly fading. Small but symbolic gatherings have begun to appear in cities across the country. Candles lit in silent protest, old national flags emerging from balconies, and students organizing anonymous demonstrations, all signs of a population that's finding its voice once more. Social media has become the new battlefield of truth and resistance. Despite strict internet controls, videos and messages from inside Belarus are spreading faster than ever, showing the growing divide between the government's narrative and the people's reality. Internationally, the reaction to this awakening has been cautious but hopeful. Western leaders are watching closely, knowing how fragile this situation is. A sudden collapse of the Lukashenko regime could create instability, but it could also open a new door for democratic transformation. The European Union has already signaled that it would be ready to support a free Belarus economically and politically if meaningful change begins. Meanwhile, Russia views this shift with alarm. The Kremlin cannot afford to lose its only loyal partner on its western border, especially while it's entangled in the war in Ukraine. Moscow's influence in Minsk has been one of Putin's few remaining strong cards in Eastern Europe, and any sign of Belarus breaking away could deal a serious blow to Russia's geopolitical ambitions. Behind the scenes, Lukashenko is facing one of the toughest challenges of his rule. His old tactics, suppressing protests, silencing opposition, and controlling the media, are no longer as effective as they once were. His government is struggling to control the narrative as the truth seeps out through encrypted messaging apps and foreign broadcasts. For the first time in years, he's being forced to navigate between loyalty to Moscow and the growing anger of his own people. Some reports suggest that even his security forces, once feared for their loyalty, are showing signs of hesitation. The regime's grip on power remains strong, but it is no longer absolute. The political earthquake shaking Belarus today is not just about internal politics, it's about identity. For decades, Belarusians have been told that their fate is tied to Russia, that independence is merely symbolic, and that defiance is dangerous. But a new generation is rejecting that narrative. They see their country not as a satellite state, but as a nation that deserves its own destiny. Many young Belarusians have grown up watching Ukraine fight for its sovereignty, and they're beginning to ask themselves the same question: what are we willing to fight for? As this transformation unfolds, uncertainty fills the air. Will this awakening lead to real change, or will it be crushed under the same heavy hand that silenced so many before? Will Lukashenko double down on repression, or will the rising pressure finally force him to seek compromise or even step aside? The answers to these questions could determine not only the fate of Belarus, but also the future of Eastern Europe as a whole. If Belarus truly breaks its silence and moves toward independence from Moscow's control, it could set off a chain reaction across the post-Soviet world. Other countries still under the Kremlin's influence might find the courage to follow suit. The collapse of Lukashenko's grip could mark the beginning of a new political order in the region, one where smaller nations reclaim their voices after decades of suppression. The implications would reach far beyond Minsk, altering alliances, economies, and the balance of power on the continent. Yet, even amid hope, the risks remain enormous. Russia may attempt to intervene politically, economically, or even militarily to prevent Belarus from drifting too far. Propaganda will intensify, cyber attacks will likely increase, and disinformation campaigns could aim to divide the opposition. But despite all of that, one truth stands firm: the people of Belarus are no longer afraid to speak. The silence that once defined their nation is being replaced by determination, unity, and an unshakable belief in change. The world has seen this story before: nations rising after decades of control, finding their voices and reclaiming their futures. Now it seems Belarus is entering that chapter of history. The sound of silence has been broken, replaced by the murmur of resistance, the echo of courage, and the heartbeat of a nation ready to define itself anew. What comes next is uncertain, but one thing is undeniable. The era of silence in Belarus is ending, and the political earthquake that has begun may soon reshape the destiny of an entire region.